Like the title of this video, today we're going to be talking about inspiration. Where do we find inspiration and how do we use it to influence our work? Today I'm going to do two different scenarios. I'm going to do what books have inspired me to write, and then more specifically, what books inspired me to write my second novel, which is The Victorian Vigilante. I'll walk through the books that I purchased and then why I found inspiration from those books. So stay tuned. Hopefully this is something that you can use in your writing to help inspire you to finishing the book that you want to write. As always, like and subscribe, and I hope you enjoy the video. When we're thinking about things that inspire us, I'm thinking more about books. There's a lot of things that go into inspiring me on writing a story, whether that be the outside, outdoors, nature, cities, places traveled. Those all have a great impact on me. I've been fortunate enough to travel a lot of the countries in Europe, and so I've just been fortunate to have gained that experience to help it influence my writing. But what inspired me to begin writing? I know it has inspired me to keep writing, but what was it that really got me to want to start? And so I have 4 books here that I'm going to talk, and I think a lot of you are probably going to roll your eyes at the 4 books that I picked because they tend to be pretty influential for a lot of people. And that isn't because this isn't a cop-out, but this is because these books are profoundly just incredible, and they're just amazing, and when I read them I can't help but be filled with ideas. And so these books are 4 that I personally hold very dear, and the obvious answer here is going to be this one for sure. So the Harry Potter book, the Harry Potter series for that matter. When I read this book as a kid, it took me to places that felt familiar, but places that I wanted to discover. And I think growing up and having a vibrant imagination, it was books like this that helped capture what I was thinking in my head. And I think these have had a profound impact because it is the hero's journey in a sense. Obviously the story of Harry going through the 7 years of Hogwarts and having to fight evil, but learning about the importance of love and fellowship. And so these books have, I read them all the time. I probably read through them once a year at least, just because they have such a huge impact. And a lot of people will pick this as a really good book, but it really, on a language level and character building and world development, it really has a lot to offer. It has a lot to look at. And having been to some of the places in the real world in Scotland and London that have influenced this book, I could see why it is so well received. And yeah, this is just one of the ones that has had a huge impact on me. Second is C.S. Lewis's The Narnia series. So this is the Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I didn't jump onto these books until the film came out. I think the film came out 2005. So 2005 is when the film came out. So I immediately picked these books up, and I fell in love again with the whimsical adventure story. It's about 4 kids who go into a magical world and get to see things that they would have never been able to see if they wouldn't have trusted in their little sister. And it's just how it weaves past world histories with the Second World War and the Blitzkrieg in London and having to be evacuated into a story that's believable, but also offers that sense of escapism. And I think for me, like, escapism is big. With Harry Potter, he gets to escape from the real world into the wizarding world. In this one, they get to escape the real world into Narnia. And in the next 2, you'll see they also get to escape their world and go into something different. And I think for me, that has something that has latched onto my writing. I am all about escapism. And my first couple of books have been more of the fantasy genre, and I have stepped into more whodunit, murder mystery, but there's still so many elements that I've kind of picked from these different books that have influenced my writing. The third one, this one is, I would say, the nucleus or the explosion. When I first wrote my, it's not finished. It never will be. But when I first wrote it, it was because of this book and this film. I just watched the film with my wife, and I know Neil Gaiman's getting some heat right now, but gosh, he's a fantastic writer. He is such a good writer, and I have a lot of his books, and every time I read one of his books, I am just deeply moved by what he's able to do with his words, and that would be Stardust. Stardust is, again, a story about a boy who doesn't seem to fit in, and he has this wall that's by his house, and when he crosses over that wall, he's in this whole other world, and his job is to find a star and everything that comes off of what that journey brings. It's such a small issue that just blossoms and blooms into something so much larger. This book, I did watch the movie first, and the movie is by far incredible. So incredible that I read the book, and although different, it is still just as moving. But this one, I have a lot to thank for helping me write my first book, which is The Shadow of Our Stars. So that is book 3. Again, a fantastic book. I would recommend reading all of these if you haven't already. And then I apologize, my dog is squeaking her toy below. Willow, do you want to come say hi? Come here. Up. Yes, up. Come on. She's right here. Okay, last. I know, I just invited you up. Last of the 4 that has had a really big impact. And I choose this one particularly because it opens the door. It opens the door into a larger world. I have a lot of the legendarium of the different books that Tolkien has written, but and this wasn't the first one I read. I read The Fellowship, but when I read The Hobbit, it changed everything for me. The Hobbit is just, I mean, it's timeless, obviously. It's still being read, and the book was published, I believe, in 29 or 30, if I'm not mistaken. I feel like silly if I got it completely wrong, but it was the 30s. Yeah. Someone in the comments will most likely correct them, and I appreciate it. It looks like maybe 37. But The Hobbit was huge. It was such a huge story for me because it was about this guy, again, going out of his norm and into a new world. And in that world, he came in contact with all sorts of different obstacles, different sorts of characters, creatures, and it just gets those writing juices flowing. The other night after I filmed my last video, which we did on plotting, I just sat in front of my free write, and I was just so inspired to write something. It was more of a short story, but a short story of a character who's pulled out from the unfamiliar, or from the familiar, and thrust it into the unfamiliar. And I just really like that. I like that flip, that world, flipping that, and so that there's conflict and there's drive and there's motivation. So The Hobbit was just huge when I actually read it. When I actually sat down and read it, I'm like, I see why people like this. And these are all, I should say, these are all kind of children's books. Stardust does tend to be more of an adult fairy tale, which, I mean, I like fairy tales. I like things that aren't real, but it makes you feel that they are real. I like mythology, and these books all play on that sense that it feels so real that it has to be. It has to be real, but we know that it isn't. And I think that doing that with your words is incredibly hard. So when I'm looking for inspiration, I'm looking at books like this. I'm reading books like The Hobbit, or I'm reading books from Ruth Ware or Lucy Foley, something that is just taken on a life of its own. And I'm not discrediting the importance of music or the importance of traveling, but these are just things that have tremendously moved me. And then obviously there's films, and then films are also incredibly moving and slightly different from the the book medium. But I have a list of them here, and so what I'll do is if I have a film that I like that moves me, I will write it down, and I have a whole list of films, and these films I've watched many, many times, and I just keep going back to them. I have About Time, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Long Story Short, Yesterday, The Wedding Date, The Prestige, Midnight in Paris, Stardust, The Kingsman, The Secret Service, The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Society. There's so many I could go over. And I think it's important that when you find something that deeply moves you, that you would write it down, that you would be reminded that there are powers within film, music, books that move you personally, because you want to, like, my goal is to recreate that experience for my readers, to move them in a way, not to copy someone else and how they do that, but to find a way to move the reader. And I've done it in some scenes. I've not done it so well in others, but again, it's something that I've learned from. And so write some of these down. I have books in here too. Some of the books I didn't get to mention were The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, How to Stop Time, also by Matt Haig, The Alice Network by Kate Quinn, The Nightingale by Christine Hannon, Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Ames. Fantastic book. I have it sitting over here. If you want a fantasy book that is 80s rock with Dungeons and Dragons, that is the go-to book. I read it so fast. I haven't read the second one. It is on my list. But yeah, it's just important to write down the things that inspire you, so that when you're feeling uninspired, that you would return to those and find inspiration. More specifically, I wanted to touch base on this book. So I wrote this a couple years ago, The Victorian Vigilante. And essentially it's about a girl who dresses up as a guy in the 1880s in London. And she goes into these underground fight clubs, and she fights people, and she's masquerading as something that she's not. And there's secret societies, and she has to decide whether she's going to do what society tells her to do, which is to be a lady, or if she wants to explore this other side of her. It's about having a duality. It's about having good inside you, but also having the presence of bad. And how do we grapple with that? And so this story was such a fun story to write, but I used books to inspire me to write this, and I'm going to go over those here. And this goes back to that research stage that happens during plotting. And so these are some of the books that I picked up that inspired me. Obviously, we had to go with a reference, maps of London. And so I needed to know what London looked like in the 1880s. And I needed to know, what buildings existed. In my book, there is the Crystal Palace. It was done for the, memory serves me correct, it was done for the World's Fair, but it burnt down, so it's not actually in London anymore, but it was at this time, so I had to research about that. So this was a great resource. This is more of the reference, but I'm talking about inspiration, what inspired me, and obviously this comes to mind. So Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, again, that book about duality, about having good and bad within you, and having to fight that, and letting one win and more than the other, and seeing the consequences that Una, which is the main character in the Victorian Vigilante, has to fight with that. She has to fight with the fact that she wants to be good, she wants to live a normal life, but she also wants to make people pay for what they've done. And it goes directly in to this. And this is Batman Year One. When I read this, I still have my sticky notes in it. There's particular scenes that I really enjoy, like dinner party scenes that I incorporated in my book. And, when Una decides to become a masked vigilante, hence the name, the Victorian Vigilante, she takes on a persona. The persona isn't the importance of the book. It is just a vehicle to get the story to where it needs to go. But I very quickly used inspiration from, what is this, Frank Miller? Yeah, Frank Miller's Batman Year One. And this was huge inspiration to me. And then there's the other aspect of it. Well, Batman's a detective, and I like the idea of Una also being a detective, but kind of more of a sleuth. And so we move to these books, which are the Sherlock Holmes books. And so the Sherlock Holmes books by Arthur Conan Doyle. I read these, A Study in Scarlet. This is Barnes and Noble's version, they broke them down into 2 different volumes, but the sleuthiness, the looking for clues, the working together, the breaking and entering, the unlocking with a tumbler, or the tumbler with a file, and all the different things made it directly into this book. And it was because of the inspiration of these multiple books. And films too. I watched films in this period, and it really helped. So really, you can look anywhere and find inspiration for anything. My next book, which again, this isn't a cover reveal, but this is it right here, the Highland Tour, was directly inspired from reading Ruth Ware, Lucy Foley, but also being on a tour in Scotland and seeing these things with my own eyes and saying, hey, there's a story here that needs to be told, and I think I want to tell it. And so I wrote it, and I think it's pretty good. And I am excited to have it come out in the next year. But again, inspiration is everywhere. I have a record collection. I listen to music extensively when I write, and that bleeds into my prose and how I write dialogue. And I don't watch a lot of television, but when I watch, I do typically watch movies, and they're very, very, I watch them with very keen intent to find things like character development and plot development, and I will write those down. And that's, again, write it down. If something moves you and inspires you, write it down. So yeah, that's pretty much today's video. It's not so much the act of writing, but how do we get ourselves to want to write? How do we get ourselves in the right frame of mind to write? And I can't help but be inspired by all the different things in my office and all the different things in the world. So if you're having trouble trying to figure out where's my story going next, read something, watch something, try to figure it out in a way that feels more organic than trying to force it out. You'll be surprised when you start writing things down, or writing quotes down, or writing words or phrasing down, that you just can't help but be inspired. And so that's pretty much the gist of today's video, how I found inspiration to start writing, but also how I found inspiration to write The Victorian Vigilante. So if any of this made sense to you, I'm happy it did. If it all feels like a bunch of mumble jumbo, that's okay. Next week, we're actually going to be talking about draft 1 and what that looks like. I'm going to go over how I draft my first draft, and then hopefully we'll get to move on beyond that point. But I'm so grateful that you stuck around this long. If you would give it a like and a subscribe. Don't forget, I have a giveaway previous video. Make sure you enter that in and win some cool stuff. A Lockbee notebook, a TWSBI Go, some ink samples, and some stickers. So again, just leave a comment on the giveaway video, which is on my channel. But as always, I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much for watching.